the Corvette Web Blast.
It's July 2014. Welcome to another Web Blast. We're here with Tom Falconer at Claremont Corvette. And Tom, you have a unique car here.
It is unique. It is the one and only XP987 GT from 1973.
And how did you happen to come across it and get your hands on it?
Well, I was very lucky to be at the right place at the right time, I suppose, but a great friend of mine, the late Jeff Lawson, who was working at Bedford Trucks as head of styling, was aware of the fact this car was on the roof at Vauxhall, and to cut a long story short, he said it would be a tragedy to crush this car. Why don't you start negotiating with the top people at GM and see if you can't rescue it? Mm-hmm. Which I duly did. A breakfast meeting in Detroit at 6 a.m. with head of styling Chuck Jordan, and basically they said, we think we ought to just crush it and do away with it, but if it's going to be in England and you're going to look after it, well, it is a beautiful car. We think that would be very appropriate.
Why was it in England?
It was in England because General Motors hadn't been able to bring themselves to pay the import duty to bring it back into the USA after a whole series. It had been at every motor show in the world during 1973, starting with Frankfurt. I saw it at Earl's Court in 1973. Mm-hmm. I actually literally drooled over it back in 73. And once it had done the show circuit, they very quickly became obvious that Wankel was not going to be the engine of the future. Mm-hmm. Rotary engines are terribly fuel inefficient and they're bad on emissions, and the car very rapidly was becoming history and they wanted to forget about it.
So it's a show car. Does that mean it's a concept car? They had planned to make cars like this?
It is a completely practical car. It was intended to be the 1976 Corvette, and there was a lot of pressure inside GM who said this is the ideal car. It's got more, although it's much smaller than a 76 Corvette, it's got more shoulder room, more leg room, a better driving position. It's a bit short on baggage space, but then think of the baggage space in your own 75. There's not an awful lot in there. No. And it was entirely practical.
Of course, you've got an engine where that is now, haven't you?
Well,
this is a mid-engine.
Yeah. It's got virtually no accommodation underneath the bonnet, but that would have been workable, and they could have done the whole thing in fiberglass. I have heard it said that DeLorean, who actually was the other driving force behind the car, when he left, he wanted to buy the design from GM. And GM were not feeling very pleased about what DeLorean had done. And they said no way. So he then had to go away and develop his own car. A car which actually is not mid-engine but is rear-engined and was much less satisfactory in many ways.
Because you mentioned this could have been done in fiberglass. It is a steel-bodied car, isn't it?
It is a steel-bodied car fabricated by Pininfarina. In fact, all the details have pretty much a Ferrari Dino feel to them. And that was the car that GM kept using in their comparative pictures as well.
So, can we have a look at the engine in the back?
Of course, yes.
Okay?
Let's get things opened up. So you've got a lot of extra space. Yeah. You have a decent amount of baggage space there, not quite as much as a...
golf clubs is what everyone talks about.
So there it is, a Mazda 13B, which is the later type of Mazda, although they've obviously moved on from there since, but installed pretty much the way that GM had put in their own Wankel engine.
Looks pretty tight. You were saying about to me privately about putting a V8 in there. That would be a bit tight, wouldn't it?
I think actually that would be a terrible thing to do. Now, the only engine I put in here would be the actual original General Motors engine, which would fit better.
Which way is the crank going on this? Is it going that way or is it going
the crank is going sideways. It is effectively a front-wheel drive unit.
Right, okay.
It's got a Cadillac front-wheel drive gearbox in there, which is also very similar to the one used in the Vauxhall. In fact, the actual gearbox in this is a Cadillac Cimarron box, which is the mini, which is like the Vauxhall Cavalier.
And what did they use for a chassis for this?
Well, the chassis was a cut-down Porsche 9146. Okay. So they took the steel pan and they shortened it and widened it to make it a better proportion, and that's what they used.
And tell us anything notable about the interior, the design of the interior?
Well, the interior is absolutely packed with brilliant features. For one thing, it has adjustable pedals. If you can see the pedals there, they shoot backwards and forwards on this lever here.
Oh my goodness.
So rather than having an adjustable seat, the pedals just go backwards and forwards on a very, very clever Archimedes screw. So you can just, so you have a fixed position seat.
Any safety implications there that your brake pedal is on a sliding mount?
I don't think so, because other manufacturers, particularly Marcos, have used exactly the same system.
Okay.
Although they had a spinning wheel on theirs. It's got fully instrumented. It's actually metric, of course, having been built by in Italy, because they wouldn't have known any different. Working ordinary GM Cadillac radio, air conditioning, whole series of lights here.
And does everything work on this car, Tom?
Everything works. The car's fully drivable, and I have driven it myself about 60 miles altogether. It has no park position on the shift because there wasn't room in this particular version. Obviously, it's an experimental car. So there's a light coming on that says, once you get into neutral, it says apply handbrake or apply parking brake. There's a light in this lot here.
Right.
But the
Is
car,
it comfortable?
extremely comfortable. I mean, what could be nicer?
How tall are you?
I'm 6'2", and I'm completely comfortable here. It's got a little rotary symbol in the middle of the steering wheel. Tilt and telescopic wheel.
Oh, okay.
All beautifully light and sort of machine age. It just feels fantastically good to drive. Absolutely comfortable, love it. One of the innovations on this car was it was the first use of the rectangular 4 headlamp system, which became pretty much the rule in the States in 1976. But in its earliest idea, which is this car has, it has a 3-position switch. Dip is the outer 2 lamps. Intermediate or freeway position brought on a pencil beam on the left-hand inner light, and then main was all 4 lights.
So, no engines in here.
So you've got the radiator, air conditioning radiator, inflatable compact spare tyre. The wiper mechanism takes up an incredible amount of space, and it still has its original engineering centre labels here and down there.
So Tom, tell us about the windscreen. Is this 2 bits of glass with a bit of bonding in the middle? How's that done?
Well, the windscreen, yes, of course, is a Bill Mitchell trademark. He loved what he called his wind split designs. The most famous ones, of course, were the Buick Riviera he did with a split screen, and the Corvette with a split back window as well. But on this car, he divided the windscreen, and in the late 1930s, divided windscreens were really trendy. He always loved that look, and this one was built, I think, probably with 2 pieces of glass bonded together. And it also has a radio antenna going down the glass as well.
Oh, okay. That's clever use, isn't it?
And people sometimes say, what on earth would you do if you broke the windscreen? And the short answer is, I would go 20 miles up to the Isle of Sheppey to Pilkington's experimental works, say, can I have a windscreen by Friday night, please? Take the old bits in. And they would make me a windscreen by Friday night, because I think they make most of the glass for prototype cars in Europe. All here in Kent.
Oh, right. That's incredible. So what have you had to do to this car from when you had it initially? Was it pretty much in this condition, or have you had to do a lot? I know you put different engines in it, but apart from that, is it pretty much as you have?
We had to repaint the car, and in fact the paint was done by our friends at Mexspray. It was a standard candy apple red. We left the paint in the door shuts, so that's original. But the actual car itself had got quite battered in all the show circuit. It was basically flown around in aircraft, in freighter aircraft. So we did all that. We repainted it about 15 years ago. And apart from that, we've really had to do next to nothing. I've had to change brake calipers and things, but they are standard Porsche 914. And in fact, a Volkswagen design, and they're incredibly easy to get. So I've always just kept it absolutely up to scratch if I possibly can.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for showing us the car. Very interesting thing, and hopefully make a very interesting web blast. We'll see you again on Corvette Web Blast. Bye-bye.